Boys and girls, welcome to VUX World. It's getting cold now. I don't know whether it's cold where you are. If you're in a more tropical climate, perhaps not. But I'm with a cup of tea, and I'm getting getting ready for the winter. Harry Potter season has started now in my household, building up to Halloween, which I don't usually celebrate as such. Whether you can celebrate Halloween, I don't know. But this year, Gemma has definitely gone overboard on pumpkins and all that kind of stuff. So I'm feeling very autumnal right now. I've got my orange fiery shirt, and we're good to go. And so, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. And if you're listening to this before Thursday, the 19th, I would recommend you join us for the webinar that we're doing with Farrell Insights and Core AI. And in there, we're going to be diving into two pieces of research that Farrell Insights have done on behalf of Core AI. One is looking at customer perceptions of artificial intelligence, current adoption of intelligent virtual assistants. How do people feel when they interact with them? Is it a preferred channel or not? And a second study is related to agent adoption of AI and the challenges and problems that customer service agents are facing, and how that has a direct impact on your customer experience. So these two studies are like two ends of the kind of two sides of the same coin, basically. To provide good customer experience, you need to provide good agent experience, and so we're going to dive into all of the ways in which you can utilize AI to do that. It's the first thing really I've seen which is doing a study specifically looking at agents, because most of the time agents seem to just be kind of completely forgotten about, and it's like they're the ones that apparently are going to lose their jobs and all this kind of stuff, whereas no one's actually sat down and said, let's go and talk to these agents, figure out what challenges they actually face, figure out how we can use technology to make their lives easier, and then what will the impact be on our customers. And at the same time, when customers are trying to contact us, what challenges are they facing, some of which we know about: long wait times, getting passed around a post from pillar to post, all that kind of stuff. So basically, on Thursday, if you are interested in finding out the details behind this research, if you're interested in figuring out what AI-based solutions work for customers and also what agents are saying about their challenges and how technology can help them, then you can go to vux.world and click on the events tab. You can sign up there, and we'll see you this Thursday. If you're listening after Thursday, you can still catch it on replay. Still, just go to vux.world, go to the events tab, and sign up, and we'll send you the video. All right, now then, without further ado, please welcome, boys and girls. My guest today is Ronald Rubens, who is the founder and CEO of Sentio CX, that are finding a very, you could call it a niche, very specific area within the conversational AI tech stack, within the conversational AI ecosystem, if you like, that hasn't been resolved yet until now. Perhaps.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ronald to the VWorks podcast. Ronald,
thank you so much, Kane. Thanks for the warm introduction. Great.
No problem. No worries. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for being here. Yeah. So we'll get into the details behind that rather cryptic introduction in a moment. But first, maybe we could be good to hear from you, Ron, in terms of your background, and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yep. No, absolutely. Happy to do so. Yeah. So I've been in the customer experience space for about a little bit over 25 years. Worked for a variety of companies. Led the European organization for Avaya, and before that, also worked for a few startups to bring them into Europe. Basically, around the Corona time, what I realized was that customer service actually deteriorated, and a lot of enterprise customers or energy companies, airlines, and what have you, insurance companies, they were pushing people to communicate with a bot or a conversational AI platform. And what I sensed was that there was a lot of frustration with customers because they wanted to have some of their answers or some of their questions answered, and it was sort of a challenge to get to the right agent. And so they were trying to find a telephone number through the bot. And then very often they had to sort of start all over again and dial in and ask the question from scratch. So yeah, so my background is basically in customer service. I've been working in the US as well for 4 years in product management, and working with very talented people on very smart call center routing tools and what have you. And then I thought, it's time to build a new sort of routing engine that doesn't only route based on historical customer profile, but basically on what is happening in a bot dialogue, and then based on that determine friction and proactively insert the right agent into the bot dialogue. So that's in a nutshell what I've created in August 2021, and here we are, 2 years later with a product and first customers and growing our business significantly.
Nice. So say that again then. It's a routing capability that doesn't rely on previous interactions and relies on current context. Is that what you said?
Well, no, it's actually a combination of those two, right? So,
Okay.
so what we do is, before we go into that, maybe it's good to describe the problem that we're trying to resolve, right? So
Yeah.
the thing about conversational AI, and you're probably one of the experts in this space for sure, but conversational AI is very powerful. Positive chatbot interactions can actually bring a lot of value to customers. Generation Z actually prefer to actually talk to a bot, especially once bots are very quick to, or at least very convenient to work with and provide the right answer instantaneously. But when the issue and the inquiry becomes a bit more complex, then you could potentially have negative chatbot interactions that actually could lead to unfavorable business outcomes. And what I mean with unfavorable business outcomes is actually a negative impact on KPIs. So it's when customers get stuck in a bot, research has shown that it's actually people get more frustrated once they get stuck in a bot than once they talk to a human being that doesn't know what the answer is. So it is very important to determine friction in the bot dialogue, or to determine when a human intervention is required. And then what we do is instead of sort of traditional routing, which is often based on first in, first out queuing mechanisms, what we do is we proactively find the right person who could be in a contact center, could be on a Genesys platform, a Avaya platform, could be on whatever, a Zendesk platform, and then insert that agent into the bot dialogue to take over the conversation. So in essence, we call it intent-based intelligent routing, but it is we also refer to real-time triage, because what we do is we route based on priority, but also route based on matching the intent with the right skill that is required to take over the conversation.
Right, I'm with you. Yeah. So would it be fair to say that it is, to put it in a language that contact center folks may understand, is it akin to kind of almost like an automated skill-based routing? Could you describe it as that or no?
Well, it is more advanced than simple sort of skill-based routing, because skill-based routing is very often, it's like you make a choice based on an IVR, what have you, and then you route it to a particular skill, and then you have to wait for agents to become available. Very often, skill-based routing is still using a traditional sort of queuing mechanism. What we do is when an energy company, for example, if somebody wants to cancel their contract, right? And I'm not sure what it is in the UK or other parts of the world, but here in this part of the world, here in the Netherlands, the customer churn is like 25% year over year, right, with energy companies. So it's a huge challenge to retain customers. So if there is, and then also these energy companies want you to talk to a conversational AI platform and talk to a bot. So this is extremely important to figure out if there is somebody who wants to cancel that contract, you want to give that person the highest priority. And if it's an important customer, you want to really make sure that the right person can take over the conversation immediately, as opposed to putting that conversation into a queue and waiting for other people who have like less relevant or less, let's say, less critical conversation to be answered first. So it's really about prioritization, but also matching the intent with the right skill sets.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so you would define based on a conversational agent that you have, which intents, which journeys should escalate to which skills, but then also certain intents or maybe certain conditions within a conversation
That's right.
might increase the priority.
Yeah, and then what we do is so coming back to the problem that we're trying to resolve. What we try to resolve is that what we want to make sure is that we improve the key performance indicators, um, key performance indicators such as customer churn. So we talked about energy companies. Another key performance indicator could be sales, or it could be NPS scores or customer satisfaction scores. And you want to make sure that when conversations are critical that actually have that influence on KPIs, that you answer these conversations within a certain service level. And that is the orchestration engine that we've built, is that we are able to route these conversations within those service levels. And in the event that there is so much traffic coming in, or many people who prefer to talk to an agent, then what we do is we can deactivate the lowest priority conversations who could actually that can actually be answered through the bot, in order to make room for more important conversations. So an example could be airline who is using a conversational AI platform for lost luggage handling. Airline is perfectly able to find where the suitcase is, whether it's being tracked, whether it's going to be delivered, and so forth. So that could be answered through the bot. But in the event that somebody says, "Yeah, but now I'm really panicking because I'm going to miss my connection, I'm going to miss my flight," then what you want to do is to filter out the most critical conversations to make sure that you basically meet the service levels that you want to meet. And that is currently, that's a real challenge, because we're integrating bots or conversational AI platform with traditional contact centers. Traditional contact centers have an ACD or routing engine that is actually pretty basic. So it's actually routes based on customer profile typically, but it does not take into account a mechanism to prioritize the interactions and to find the right skills. And I think the reason why this is relevant is if the conversational AI platform is able to answer many questions, right? So let's assume that, and I think that's a study that Gartner even did in 2031. They believe that 30% of all interactions can be completely automated by conversational AI. But then it still leaves you with 70%, or a significant part of the interactions that actually should be answered by a live agent. And in my view, or our vision, is that we could create an environment where there is a harmony between live agent and a virtual agent. So with a conversational AI platform. So you could basically orchestrate conversations in such a way that you could start with a bot dialogue, and then once the question becomes a bit more complex, or when human intervention is required, then you have to make sure that you instantaneously make the right person available to take over the conversation.
Yeah, I definitely concur. Well, I haven't done the exact same level of research as Gartner, obviously, but you could see how that stat would ring true. I mean, a lot of there's two ways of looking at this, and I've mentioned this a number of times on the podcast, which is when businesses start to implement conversational AI, you either go kind of high and wide, or you go kind of low and narrow. So the low and narrow would be find a specific conversation, specific use case where you can add value by automating the end-to-end conversation.
Exactly.
So, but within that, inevitably, you're going to need to escalate at some point. Some parts because you have to, and that's the purpose of the assistant in that instance, is to make sure that at the right place you get escalated to the right person. So, for example, you're in the process of completing an income and expenditure form or something like that, or maybe you want to have a sales conversation, but the assistant is there to gather some information up front. Or maybe your use case, actually, it's always going to have edge cases that you can't quite understand, and so you escalate. And so those escalations in that conversation is one type of escalation. But then if you look at the other strategy, which is to go kind of like high and wide, that's starting with routing. So starting from the beginning of, tell me what you need, I'll tell you what I need, and then I'll just put you through to someone. So in both instances there, if you're starting from the conversation level, we're going to build a deep conversation about a specific use case. We need to escalate in certain instances. Right now, that escalation will be hard coded at every point in time where it needs to happen.
Yep.
If you're sensible about the way you architect things, you'll probably have a piece of the conversation, a module basically, which handles all escalations. And so you
Yep.
just defer to that module and you'll handle the escalation there.
Mm-hmm.
In the other instance, the high and wide instance, you're going to have lots of intents, 200, 300, depending on how many services you've got. And then you're going to hard code basically every intent is going to go to a certain queue or what have you. So that's pretty much how it's done today.
Yep.
What would be the difference
Yep.
in having Sentio CX into that equation in both of those scenarios?
Yep.
And what would be because that's what a lot of people are going to be in that
Sure.
situation right now. They're doing all this hard coded, all manual.
Yep.
Like what's the added value of having Sentio CX do that instead?
Yep. No, very good question. So basically, the way it works today is that when there's an integration between a CCaaS platform or contact center platform and a conversational AI platform, then once the escalation occurs, which is very often it's initiated by the user, right? Somebody says, I want to talk to an agent. Then basically the way it works is that you hand off the conversation to a CCaaS platform that's being put in a queue. And it very often becomes unpredictable how long it's going to take to get to the right agent. The big difference with the orchestration that we do is that we leave the conversation in the bot during the wait time. And in other words, if somebody says, and also we trigger based on specific intent. So if somebody says, I want to cancel my contract, they did not explicitly ask for an agent, but what we could say is we could assume that it is that customer is better off to immediately get routed to a person who can take over the conversation in order to retain the customer. So it's not only based on a proactive escalation from the user, but it's actually based on intents that we classify and then based on priority, get to the right agent or bring the right agent into the mix. Now, what would happen if somebody would wait, right? Let's say there's a person, you have a web shop, and somebody says, I need help with a purchase, right? And another person says, I want to have a bit more information about product X or product Y. What we want to do is if somebody says, I need help with a purchase, that actually should have a higher priority, we should find the right agent with the best sales skills to actually get inserted into that bot dialogue. Now, let's assume that the agent is still busy, right? So let's say the predicted wait time is, let's say, 2 minutes, right?
Mm.
Now, you keep the conversation in the bot, so the customer could still communicate with the bot and still get answers, whereas otherwise you would lose the conversation if you already handed off. But during that wait time, a customer could say, you know what, I'm not going to wait for 2 minutes. I'm gonna go to your competitor because I don't want to wait for 2 minutes. Then that could trigger a higher priority handoff, so that you basically get ranked higher in our routing engine, so that the right agent could then be inserted to take over the conversation. So it's true orchestration where it's a lot more seamless as opposed to what it is today. And what it is today is basically sort of throwing chats over the fence into another queue. We're waiting for an agent to pick out the right conversation from an unassigned pool of chats. So this would be a lot more effective because you really orchestrate that based on service levels and have access to the right agent at the right time.
So what do you have? You have like within the Sentio CX platform, you would set service levels
Correct
within there, do you?
Correct. And then what we do, and we have our routing engine or our routing algorithm has been patented. So we have a US patent on our routing engine. And basically what we do, the main vehicle to rank conversations is to constantly, once we have the service level, we constantly adjust the service level even more based on priority and based on how the conversation evolves in a conversational AI platform. So it becomes a lot more fluid in terms of how conversations should be paired with the right agent.
Right, I'm with you. So going back to the example there of someone's doing it manually, the primary difference, if I'm understanding this correctly, is that using Sentio CX, the chat stays open, so the
Correct.
session's still active,
Correct.
so that a conversation can continue in the meantime.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
that's right. That's correct. We have an API that we've developed that actually integrates with bot vendors, with conversational AI platforms, and the way it works is we have called a seamless handoff protocol that we've developed, and it's basically, so we're keeping the conversation in the bot, and so we make the request for pairing, we publish the predicted wait time, and the second step is once the agent becomes available, then that person will get injected. So in other words, the big difference is that as opposed to throwing conversation over the fence, we insert the right agent into the bot dialogue. So we do it the other way around, if you will.
Right. So presumably then, if needs arise, the agent could just transfer the conversation back to the bot.
Correct.
And get out of there.
100%. 100%. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So once the agent has taken over the conversation, the bot could still listen in and take over the conversation once the agent drops.
Right. And is that where the patent is?
Yeah, that's the patent. The patent is based on the notion of the triage, so intelligent routing. So based on ranking the conversation based on priority, but also to be able to deactivate the low priority conversations temporarily when service levels go through the roof. So in other words, if you have an airline and everybody wants to make an inquiry about lost luggage and they just want to have reassurance from an agent, then you really want to filter out conversations where there's more critical need to talk to a live agent, and then you could temporarily deactivate the conversations to keep the conversation in the bot. So that could lead to two things. You could either have the bot answer the question, or you could sort of take the telephone number or what have you, and to ask if you could respond to that person at a later time. But it's really all about managing critical conversations in order to basically keep the key performance indicators to keep them in mind, because I mean, what you see is that customer churn is really a big challenge today. Agent retention is a big challenge as well. There was a recent Salesforce report that says 75% of agents are burned out. And the reason for that is because you're pushing all the conversations to the agent, and you really have to be able to filter it out. And very often, and I think this is a big dilemma in the contact center space, is that your best agents typically get burned out the fastest because they have the best skills, so they're then the highest demand. So you also need to be able to orchestrate conversations in such a way that you protect your best agents as well, and that's why we built that sort of mechanism in place to do that.
That makes sense. So when you say deprioritize lower value conversations, do you mean switching off routing on those specific intents?
Correct. Yes,
okay.
Exactly. Temporarily.
That
right?
Makes sense.
So this is when service levels will be met again, then those conversations will still lead to an agent. But when it really matters, what you really want to do is when you only have, let's say, 20 or 30 agents, you really want to make sure that those 20, 30 agents focus on the most critical conversations. It's like triage, right? So triage is like what happens in an emergency room at a hospital, right? Where you really want to prioritize your patient that needs immediate care, right? If you will.
Yeah.
But also match it with the right skill set as well, the right doctor. Right.
So presumably then within the Sentio CX platform, I would be able to go in there and say, okay, here's all the intents that I have available. Here's the ones that are like crucial, high priority.
Yep.
Here's the ones that, should it come to it, deprioritize.
Well, no, the deprioritization is done automatically, right? But that happens when service levels get exceeded. That's also part of our patent and our routing engine. The ability to classify the intents. That is, so what we have, and I mean, I would love to show you a demo, of course, but the way it works is very simple. We populate all the intents from the bot into our tool. So our tool could be embedded into Zendesk or into Genesys or Avaya. And then so we populate all the intents, and then basically it's you just tick on it and say, and then assign the skill and a priority to it, right? So I know it's a very we have a product with a pretty interesting sort of user interface. So we make it very clear in terms of what intents should lead to a potential handoff. And so that's what we call intent classification. And next step is, once the system is running, you recognize the intents, and then there's this whole mechanism in place where we find the right agents with the right skills and proficiency levels, and then match it with the intent.
That makes sense, yeah. And so, is there? You mentioned Avaya, Genesis, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a restriction as far as what platforms you can integrate with? Is that something that you would need to do if someone's using a platform that you don't currently integrate with, or is it an API that they can just integrate into if you don't support natively that particular platform?
Yeah, so on the live agent side, it's basically an app or a widget that we insert into a Zendesk or into a Genesis platform. And then our goal was not to replace the workspace. So the workspace is still, with Genesis or Avaya platform or a Zendesk platform, because otherwise it would be too disruptive if we were to sort of replace the entire sort of live agent workspace. So that's not our plan. So the plan is to integrate into those tools, but just sort of provide that sort of intelligent routing into those tools. And that's exactly what we do. And then on the other end, we have an API that actually integrates with the different conversational AI platforms. We've spent like 2 years on building the product and building the API structure. So our goal is also to standardize on that API. So we already have support like 4 or 5 bot vendors today, and the plan is to expand our partnerships there as well. And then on the live agent side, we integrate with Zendesk, Chatwood, Genesis, and eventually we'll look into Avaya as well.
So the agent integration side,
Mm-hmm.
that would essentially, what would it do? That would, let's say, for example, if I'm using Zendesk.
Yep.
So maybe I have a chatbot right now that routes to a queue, a mailbox. Chats come in that hit the mailbox. Agents will just go in there, pick one, whatever.
Yep.
Integrated into Sentio CX. What's the difference in terms of what the agent sees, or do you have to configure something in Zendesk to create priority queues and stuff like that? Like, how does it?
No, so what we do is we want to avoid sort of duplication in administration. So what we do is we take the existing skills that are because now over the last couple of months, I mean, Zendesk has made a lot of announcements on expanding their product portfolio. So they do have skills that they use as well. So we take the skills from Zendesk, but then we add additional attributes to it. And attribute could be proficiency level, so the degree to which that person has that particular skill, but also the capacity. So in other words, how many conversations can an agent handle simultaneously, especially for chat, could be 2 or 3 or what have you. So we integrate into that tool. And then what we do is we route the conversation into the workspace, right? So in other words, the agent will get notified that there is a critical conversation that actually matches their skill and proficiency level.
Right.
Right. And then previously what happened was, especially with Zendesk, is that chats would be routed into sort of an unassigned pool of conversations for the agent to pick out the right conversation. And I think what we do is we automate that process by matching the right agent with the right conversation.
Right. So from an agent's perspective, it's kind of invisible. It's just that the right thing pops up at the right time for them, or hits their queue at the right time. Or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But it also protects them as well, these agents, right? Coming back to the previous point that I made about agent retention, the lights are going out here in the office. So in other words, what you want to do is to make sure that the agent with the best skill sets or the highest proficiency level, as we would say, is somewhat protected, right? So in other words, you don't want to bombard your best agent with all kinds of even lower priority conversations, right? So it's all about sort of using AI to do the pairing between the user and the agent.
Right. And then, so what platforms did you say that you integrate with on the other side, on the conversational AI platform side, or is all of that API based at the minute?
Yeah, so we have Dialogflow, Google Dialogflow. We have Microsoft. We have Rulai. We're also working on Cognigy, and we're also looking into other bot vendors as well.
Okay, so if I was to use Dialogflow, and integrate into Sentio CX, do I still need to, on every kind of dialogue node, for example, put in a specific kind of like webhook or whatever to escalate out at all of the relevant points?
No, you don't need that. So what we do is we override the escalation. So nothing should happen with the Dialogflow. The only thing is what we do is we populate the intent, and we basically say once this intent is being triggered, then we'll find the right agent and have that conversation be inserted into that dialogue with Dialogflow.
Nice, interesting. Okay, and is this something that kind of like, is it like a self-service thing? Someone licenses Sentio, they can just click on integrate Dialogflow CX, they're using Genesis, so boom, that's done, and they're away.
Yeah, it's very user-friendly. So in other words, what we do is we configure, let's say we have a Zendesk version, and it's pretty straightforward. So we basically activate, the API key. The application will then be inserted. We're on the marketplace of Zendesk. Then that sort of app will be inserted, and then you will immediately have access to, especially our administration tool. You could pick, which bot vendor or conversational AI platform you want to integrate into. So if it's Dialogflow, for example, you basically click on Dialogflow, you enter, the API key, identifier, a couple of things for administration purposes, and then once that's done, then it's basically up and running, and then it's just a matter of figuring out, which intents do you want to classify for potentially an escalation, right? And that is something that, like for example, we have a few customers right now that actually have a lot more escalations at the very beginning, but what they want to do is to make the bot smarter, so to look into, what part of the conversation can be managed by the bot, but then still have enough flexibility to escalate or to send it off to the right agent at the right time.
Yeah. How do you think about, you don't have to give away the specific numbers, but like how do you kind of think about pricing something like this? Because there's different ways that you will become one of the many vendors that companies have. They might use Dialogflow and Genesis, but then they might have a third-party analytics platform, and they might have other kind of capabilities for NLU management and stuff like that. And then there's now Sentio CX that handles routing and stuff. So how do you think about pricing this within the greater context of the ecosystems that people may have?
Yeah, there's three types of pricing strategies, right? That we've started with the first one, which is basically to align our pricing model with the live agent software, with the workspace. So in other words, once we Sentio CX enable a workspace, so in other words, add intelligent routing, then we charge on a per agent basis, which is an amount of 59 euros or dollars per month per agent. And then that basically gives you the entire conversation orchestration suite. The second scenario would be more of usage-based, which we're exploring at the moment. We started this company 2 years ago. We brought out our first release just a few months ago, and our plan is to further develop the product and also make the pricing model a bit more flexible. So usage-based is definitely something which is on the top of our mind. But then there's a third one, which is being used by some vendors, and that's sort of performance-based. And performance-based could be, we could show them with our analytics tools how we improve the interactions and how we meet the KPIs, right? That are the most critical ones. And then what we can measure is the sort of before and after scenario, right? And that's something that we're exploring with some larger enterprise customers at the moment. We do have the tools for that. We do have the analytic tools, so we could actually show what the impact is of using our routing engine.
Nice. Yeah, I think the kind of consumption based and maybe the performance based one might be worthwhile in the short to medium term.
Exactly.
The question the question is, if businesses do what they intend to do, more conversations will be automated, performance will get greater, and therefore the need to escalate becomes less.
Yeah.
So I suppose that you may have in the short term though, as more kind of companies deploy AI assistants,
Yep.
most of them are either going to begin with the sole purpose of routing,
Yep.
or they're all going to have get out clauses, which is routing. So the immediate future, I think the opportunities are going to be opening up like far and wide. I suppose I don't know if you've thought about how to maintain the value as businesses begin to contain more automation within the assistants and require slightly less routing.
It's actually,
or do you not think that'll
no,
occur?
absolutely. No, we're actually talking to, and that's actually relatively fresh, this conversation. We're actually talking to an AI agent assist company in Silicon Valley, and what we're doing is we're exploring an integration. And what we do is actually quite interesting. So we provide the routing to the right agents. So we know the agent have, for example, particular skills with proficiency levels. Now, the more proficient an agent is with a particular skill, the less help they likely need, right? And but if somebody has a lower proficiency level for a particular skill, then you probably want to be more proactive when it comes to assisting the agent with the right information. So we could actually, with our solution, also make the agent assist solution stronger, and really look at the profile of the agent as well. So that's one thing. The second thing that I want to emphasize is that I personally believe that conversational AI and generative AI will become better and better, right? I mean, if you see what happened over the last 2 years, it's just absolutely flabbergasted. I'm flabbergasted or amazed with the progress that happened, right? So it is very likely that the conversational AI platforms will be super, super smart. However, when escalations need to occur, when human intervention needs to be is required, it's very likely a human agent or live agent that has a specific expertise level or specific skill, right? So the notion of finding the right agent becomes more and more important over time, and that's why we link the intent to the skill that is required. And this is very different from traditional contact centers, which basically have a bunch of skills, but we could have up to maybe 80 or 100 skills that are required to actually orchestrate these conversations, including knowledge workers that are outside of the contact center domain. And we're talking to one particular customer, and unfortunately I cannot mention the name yet, but what they want to do is in the event that somebody says, you know what, I'm so upset, I'm going to take legal action, then you really want to be very careful how you want to sort of handle these type of conversations. So you need to have a person to insert that person into the dialogue, who is most likely not a dedicated contact center agent, but somebody who is just sitting in the back office or a knowledge worker within the enterprise to actually take over the conversation. So that is something that we could do as well. And I think it becomes more and more important to have that sort of matching between skills, proficiency levels, and the right intents within the bot.
Yeah, and it's definitely not going to ever get to a situation where, or anytime soon, where agent escalation is not required. I don't envisage that being the case. I think that the future is very much the AI assistants will handle what they can handle, and probably will be increasingly more capabilities over time. But I don't see a world very quickly happening where agents are and not part of the conversation, And also, even if one company's escalations are less, more companies will be deploying AI assistants.
Yeah.
And so you've got, over time, the general kind of adoption of businesses implementing this stuff grows tremendously.
Yeah.
And then over time, perhaps they escalate slightly less. But when they do escalate, it's going to be like at the crucial part where a human's better for this conversation.
Exactly.
And therefore,
Exactly.
I can definitely see the value still being there for sure.
Absolutely.
How are you thinking about generative AI then?
Mhm.
And large language models that don't strictly, I mean, you could use them to classify an intent and use them that way, or you could use them from the perspective of not using intents,
Mhm.
and therefore, if everything's based on intents, what would happen in a situation where somebody's using large language models very heavily
Mhm.
for answering questions and managing that kind of part of the conversation? Have you had any thoughts around how you might kind of achieve the same routing capabilities when there's technology involved that isn't built on intents?
No, absolutely. I think that is sort of the next step, right? So intents is the most straightforward way of triggering a handoff. In large language models, it could be specific words that are being used or a sentiment. And large language models, what they do is they basically, I mean, if you look at Louis, for example, they provide a probability score, which basically is a reflection of the extent to which the bot understands the human being, but also they have another parameter, which is the sentiment score. Now, those scores can be used within our algorithm to adjust the service level. In other words, to influence the ranking, but also find the right agent, right? I believe that with generative AI and large language models, it even increases the need to have conversation orchestration. Because it is much more of a sort of a free format discussion that people have, as opposed to some traditional bots that actually had like menus of you want support, or you want to talk to an agent and click this button and so forth. With generative AI and large language model, it becomes a lot more fluid and natural. But even there, it is important to figure out what is the right time to have a human being to take over the conversation. Because people don't like it when they get stuck, and they notice it when they talk to a robot or to a machine, and very often, and this is the research that we've done, they prefer to have an escape, especially if it's a really important conversation or a critical issue that they want to resolve.
100%, yeah. It's the same thing as using a website that's not usable, But so what you were referring to there, Microsoft Louis, that's more of an intent-based NLU system. So those confidence scores that you will get from every NLU system, which I think you could use if so, for example, if someone escalated from Dialogflow into Sentio CX, perhaps you could send them. Well, really, you'd need to disambiguate that within the assistant first, I think, in order to make better use of Sentio CX. So, for example, if someone said something and if the NLU system came back and said, well, there's 60% confidence that it could be one of these two things.
Yep.
That's really, you don't really want to just throw that to Sentio CX. You really want to disambiguate, figure out what it is, which one of those things you want. And then once you've captured the intent, you would then escalate.
Exactly.
When it comes to large language models, for example, I suppose what you could do, so some companies may implement a chatbot that's just answering questions, just FAQs.
Yeah.
And you can do that with intents, and lots of companies have done that very successfully. A lot of companies are experimenting using large language models to do that kind of FAQ management, which is a less mature use case, but still it adds a degree of value.
Yeah.
What on the conversation design and practitioner side, what they will need to be able to do is work out when a conversation's going nowhere, and then figure out when to escalate.
Exactly.
That's something is required, and perhaps what they need to do in that process, and when they do escalate, is summarize the conversation. And so maybe a product development angle for Sentio CX could be being able to take a transcript from a conversation that's being had that uses large language models, and then you would use a large language model to say, summarize this conversation, tell me what the customer's trying to achieve. And then you would then pair that with the list of stuff that the customer's described this thing is able to do, and
Yep.
the routing and all that kind of stuff. So maybe it's just a case of maybe you will need to bring it back, whether you want to call it an intent or not. It's still a job to be done, or still a need to be fulfilled.
Yep.
And so perhaps there's perhaps it's done that way, or you just mandate that whether you're using large language models or not, on the platforms, on the conversational AI platform side, you just need to tell us what the need is, and you don't touch anything else. So if a customer's using large language models, they would be responsible for doing the summary and sending you, this is what the conversation's about, this is the intent, or this is the need.
Exactly. But then you still need orchestration. You still need to filter out, what are the most critical conversations in order to, meet your business objectives. And I think it's a combination of sort of what's happening within the conversational AI platform, but also we combine it with, the customer profile. Now, in the event of Microsoft, for example, what they can do is to provide a parameter which is an indication of whether a customer relationship is being improved or is deteriorating, and that's really funny how they're using AI to come up with these sort of conclusions, and the result is simply a parameter that we can capture within our algorithm, and that's really the sort of utopian version of the product, is really to to really provide harmony between virtual and live agents, and figuring out what is the most critical moment that a human being could take over that conversation and will be made available. So there's a lot of interesting things to do from our side,
definitely,
for sure.
And making that process smooth, because there's been times when, even as a user, I've been having a conversation with a chatbot and I've been escalated to a human, and I'm just sitting there. It's like no acknowledgement,
Right.
waiting forever, and it's just a terrible experience.
Exactly.
So I definitely think there's something to it, and especially if you're able to provide, which it sounds like you do, which is almost like a hub that handles all escalations, so you don't have to do it manually on every single piece, in your architecture. You just, wherever there's an escalation, throw that to Sentio CX, throw the intent with it. The one thing you probably might want to do, and I don't know if you do this or not as well, is allow the platform to send a summary of some description of the call, so that you can then pop that up, so that the agent's not starting again from the beginning.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we do. So we basically hand off the historical information as well. But that's exactly right. So we're talking to some bot vendors, and they actually like to work with us, and the reason is very simple, is that they don't have to worry about when does the right agent become available, because we really look at it from two perspectives. And when I was working on the patent, it became very obvious that many vendors were looking at just one side of the fence. So there were the bot vendors were trying to say, okay, I know that we need to do an escalation, so how do we make the escalation possible? And then you had the contact center vendors that were more concerned about how do we route particular conversations. But you really have to bring the two things together. If you want to route the conversation, you want to insert the right agent, you need to make sure that you have some sort of knowledge when the right agent becomes available, right? And so you need to bring that into the equation as well. And that is to put that into like a dialogue or into a bot design is pretty complex, right? And so we take that burden away, and in fact make the bot smarter, if you will, right? By making the right agent available at the right time.
Exactly.
So it improves the reputation of the bot vendors. That's one thing that we do.
Yeah, and it definitely gives the customer on the other end of it. The customer doesn't know it's Sentio CX. It's still the bot. It's still part of the capabilities, and so it appears as though, and not just appears, that it is that the assistant is better capable at putting you through to the right person. And if you need to be putting through to the right person, delaying that or creating an issue at that stage is just adding fuel to the fire, because you've already tried the website, now you've tried the chatbot, and now it's like, okay, just get me through to someone.
Exactly.
So yeah, definitely, no, I can see definitely the value. So what we'll do is, I'm going to have to wrap it up there, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for joining me. If you're tuning in, listening to this, and you want to try this out, or you want to reach out, then you can go to sentiocx.com. SENTIOCX.com. And I'm assuming, Ronald, you'd be happy for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn or what have you if they have any questions or anything like that.
Absolutely. Very good. Thank you so much, Kane.
Perfect.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ronald. Appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning in. It was absolutely epic. as I said, if you're listening to this after Thursday, as I said at the beginning, you can still watch back our webinar that we did with Core AI and Farrell Insights. If you're listening to this as this is published, you can still register for that webinar on Thursday the 19th, where we're going to be looking at some unique, fresh research coming from customers and agents around the adoption of artificial intelligence, the challenges agents are facing, and how you can make dramatic improvements to your CX. Thank you so much, Ronald. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.